Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the organisers for having the opportunity to present. I've been sort of meaning to come to PyCon Sweden for quite a few years, and last year I really got a bit of FOMO, so I thought, right, I need to actually submit a talk and see. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. My talk's pretty light-hearted. It's a bit of fun. It's about a side project, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through how it came about. And what it is, and hopefully it'll be useful to many of you in the room if you're not already familiar with it. Before that, quickly going to just spend one slide on who I am. So my name is Phil Ewels. I'm not actually really a Python developer as such. I would more call myself a scientist. I started off working in academic research for most of my life, but then got the bug for building open source software, and somehow found myself ending up in leaving academia a couple of years ago and joining a startup company called Sekira, which is based around creating scientific software. Our main now I have a really cool job title of product manager for open source, so I just get to spend all my time giving stuff away for free to the community. And our main tools are Nextflow for handling workflow, and so really like heavy-duty workflow analysis, and then the tool I wrote, MultiQC, for doing reporting. So I'm not going to talk about that now, but if you're interested in any of the stuff on this slide, then come and find me in a coffee break, and I'm always happy to chat. So, rich-click. 3 parts to this talk. Start off about how it came about, some introductions, some background. I'll talk a little bit about what you can do with this thing, this Python library, with how it might be useful in code that you write and tools you build. And then I'll wrap up a little bit about how to deal with stuff becoming out of hand if you're writing open source software, and a little bit of advice at the end. So, how many people, show of hands, have heard of or used Click? Yeah, most of you. I thought it was worth just putting a quick intro to Click because not everyone has used it, but many people will have built command line tools using Python. You may have used argparse, you may have used typer, but Click is one of the main ones. It's been around a long time, very well established, maintained by the Palettes group that also maintains stuff like Flask and Ginger. So the concept of Click is very simple. You have your Python script, so you've got a function here that just does whatever. And you import Click and you wrap some decorators around your function, which just tell Click how to bundle up your code as a command line interface. You can see it's not very many lines of code. We're just basically sort of saying this is a Click function, and we've got 2 command line flags to use it, count and name in this case. And then you can add some extra arguments to those decorators if you want to, such as help text, defaults, whether something's required or not. And that's it. That's all you need to do to use Click. Now you can use your little Python script as a command line tool. You get --help for free, which gives some output telling you how to use it. It does things like validation of inputs. So if I run that script without any arguments because one of them was required, it will refuse to run. And if you use the tool properly, it passes all those arguments into your function so you can use it. So it takes your little Python script and makes it generalizable as a tool which anyone can use in the terminal very, very easily with very little extra effort. So that's part 1. Hands up if you've heard of this library, Rich. Yeah, fewer. I think everyone should know this library. I love it. I'm a bit of a fanboy when it comes to Rich. So Rich was started during COVID by this guy, Will McGugan, who's based in Edinburgh, in Scotland. And he's now spun a company out of the success of Rich called Textualize. They do really cool stuff. Like this is a screenshot of a different library they have called Textual, where you can build TUIs, terminal interfaces, which are like point and click, but running in your terminal. Really, really cool. This is an open source tool built with it called Posting. But anyway, Rich is a Python library, and basically it was dedicated towards having nice outputs in the terminal. It allows you to easily generate outputs that have lots of colors, layouts, tables, things like this. So if you're printing anything to the terminal, and anything you do, you should probably use Rich to make it look nice. A lot like Click, it takes very little extra work, very little extra boilerplate, and you can get really nice looking outputs. So I've nicked some examples from the README. Here we're just kind of, you can just use it in specs and you can see really nice output straight out the bat. You can build things like progress bars for any long-running processes, any concurrency stuff. If you're handling logs, you can really, it's got nice kind of log formatters, which again, pretty much have really sensible defaults straight out the box. So you can read that output a bit more easily. You can do syntax highlighting, you can do nice tracebacks, you can have all kinds of stuff, lots of functionality from Rich, but the concept is always the same, making stuff look nice in a terminal. So when I found Rich, I loved it. I started building it into all my tools, and all my outputs look really nice and really well formatted and colorful, and that was great. But now, the output from Click kind of looked a bit gray. And there's this kind of this contrast between all this really lovely, well-formatted stuff and the Click output, which was just very monochrome and kind of stuck out a little bit. So I thought, right, maybe I need to sort of try and get these two to play together. I need to think up a really witty, clever name for some package which summarizes this, and so Rich Click was born. I'm not going to win any prizes for that one, but it is at least clear. So, Rich Click, what does it do? Let's go back to the scripts I showed you a second ago where we have Click. The most important thing about Rich Click that you need to know is it is ridiculously easy to use, and I think that's why it's become popular. All I have to do is I take the import Click statement and I switch it with import Rich Click as Click. That's it. So if you have any scripts built with Click already, it's literally a one-line change, and that will take your command line output from your tool to actually look like this. I've put the original Click output there for reference. It's almost exactly the same, but now we've got a few niceties built in by default. We've got some colors, the options get wrapped in a little box, required shows up as red, stuff like this. It's a small thing, but it makes your tool easier to read, especially for any kind of newcomers. And it's just so easy to do, there's very little excuse not to do it. Rich is clever about stuff like if you're piping output to a non-interactive terminal, for example, it will strip all the ANSI codes, so you don't need to worry about things like that. It's generally very compatible with things, and it just works. We can do other stuff. Click has other output. This is what happens before when I showed you the error, when I ran without an argument. And now with that single import, the error is transformed into a much nicer red box so you can see straight away what's going wrong, and the help text is a bit easier to hockey. So that's it. If that's all you remember from today, it's that one line, and you get some nicer outputs. Win-win. But of course, I didn't stop there, because once you start on something good, it's too tempting to carry on. Something else that always kind of bothered me a bit with Click is that if you have an argument, a positional argument instead of an option, he doesn't tell you about it in the help text. Basically, by default, you get this, which Rich Click honors the same defaults as Click in this case, where it sort of says name there, but it's not in the main help text underneath, and it's quite easy to miss. So you can configure Rich Click to do something a little bit different. You say, OK, I want to show arguments, and now your Click arguments get shown in their own little box underneath. Happy. Small thing, makes it a bit easier. What happens if you have a tool which has a lot of flags, maybe many Click subcommands, things which kind of, you get this huge list of like 150 lines of things, and you want to be able to sort of organize those a little bit. Then you can add some configuration to Rich Click to say, these are the parameters, I want you to group them in different boxes, maybe with different titles in different kind of logical order. This isn't really possible in Click, but with Rich Click, you can do this in a very declarative way. This is output from one of the tools I do for my day job, and you can see there's many, many different flags, and I can really have a lot of control over how they're displayed, which makes it much easier for people coming in, rather than having to wade through everything. You can kind of explain in that output. So that's cool. We're using Rich to handle all the outputs, which means that also we can very easily then have a bit more creative control. And I think this is the reason that my abstract was chosen, was because I mentioned there would be emojis of unicorns and rainbows. So you can do stuff like that. Like we can throw in colors, we can throw in formatting, bold, italic, emojis, all this kind of stuff that you can kind of go a bit wild with if you want to. And also, Rich also understands Markdown, for example. So if you have a whole big block of Markdown about how to use your tool, you can just throw in some markdown, and Rich will render it nicely on the terminal, including also stuff like this. This is a link. So Rich lets you put in hyperlinks now into your help text and stuff, so users can control click that, and it will take them to a web page, which again is really nice, especially if you have a lot of help text or a lot of options. You don't have to. Rich click ships with kind of sensible defaults in order to make stuff kind of work easily. Hopefully, it looks pretty good out of the box, but it is also highly configurable. So basically, any time in the output that you see something colored, you can probably change what that color is. If it's in a box, you can change how the box looks or whether there's a box at all. So almost everything is configurable, and this is from the rich click docs. You can kind of see a few different examples of like, okay, how do I tweak this to make it look exactly how I want it to look? So you can have some fun there. And actually, on the rich click website, there was a blog that one of the guys I maintained the package with put out a couple of days ago with a few kind of examples of different things you can do, which are quite fun. He's also pulling in other Python libraries here, like there's a library to do color gradients and generate artwork text and stuff like that. So again, in like 5 lines of code or something, you can take your normally kind of boring help text and make it a bit more personal. So that's fun. Last bit on the features really then is, say you've got some other tool which uses Click, and you don't control that source code, so you can't go in and mess around with the imports and stuff. Well, don't worry. I know you all love dad jokes. I know I do. We can go in, and there's actually a rich Click CLI. So we prepend that onto any other CLI tool, which is using Click, and you get the same behavior, the same outputs, which may or may not be that useful in practice, but it's there. And we can do some extra cool stuff like with that. So we can kind of have some additional functionality, such as specifying the output of that help text. We can now specify HTML or SVG output of a help text instead of just the normal terminal output. And if you look at that SVG, you've got something that looks like this, which is quite useful if you want to embed things in your README files or something like that showing usage. You don't have to go and manually generate and copy all this stuff. You can just set up some automation which exports some SVGs that look great, and you can embed straight into your documentation. Pretty cool. OK. How many people are going to go home and start putting rich click into their software? Ah! Right, I'm going to go. I'm done. This was like a little hobby project, right? I had my own CLI tool, or 2 of them I really spent a lot of time with, and it bothered me that they didn't have colors. It actually started because Will McGugan, who wrote Rich, did some styling of his own CLI tool. The Rich itself also has a CLI. And I saw that, and I was like, I want that in my tool. So I went and looked at his code, which was all open, chatted to him a bit, and made it into this open source package. But I did it for entirely selfish reasons. I did it because I wanted it. But it hit a niche, and what happened looked like this. And actually, I dug out this slide, the stats for this slide last week, and I looked at it, and last time I looked, it was like here. And I'm like, oh, OK. It's got a bit more popular. And it turns out that if you kind of piggyback on the success of some other really hugely popular Python packages, then and if you pick up even about 1% of those usages, which I think is roughly where I am with rich-click, then you start pulling a lot of downloads and a lot of traffic on PyPI. Sorry about the bandwidth, wherever the keynote speaker was from yesterday. So this is cool. I mean, like, fantastic. Loads of people are using my random little scrappy project in their tools, and obviously, hopefully, finding it useful. But of course, what happens with this is that you get lots of feature requests. Turns out that Click doesn't sort of just do thin little help text like that. Click is an enormous library that has tons of functionality built into it, and other people are using this functionality that I didn't really know about, and it, in cases, didn't work well with Rich or rich-click. And people started putting in issues, feature requests, bug reports. People also started putting in a lot of pull requests, big pull requests, and honestly, those people are much, much better at writing Python code than I am. And it started to be quite a lot of effort trying to review pull requests, merge it, and kind of stay on top of this library. Also, around here, I was lucky enough to benefit from some of the excellent Swedish paternity laws and had parental leave coming up, and I sort of started freaking out a little bit about it. And what happened next was a real great testament to the strength of open source, the strength of the Python community. Two things happened very close to each other. Firstly, this guy, some of you may have heard of him. This is part of my reason for having FOMO last year, as I think he was a keynote speaker last year. And so Typer is a very popular tool that he wrote to do command line interfaces, and it's built on top of Click. So it uses Click under the hood. And what that meant was that basically a lot of people using Typer were coming and using rich Click and trying to get them. And it worked fairly well together. But Sebastian reached out to me on Twitter and was like, I love Rich. I love what you've done with rich Click. I want to make this like a native feature within Typer, basically. And he was super lovely. I've never spoken to him before this. And he kind of was very anxious that he didn't sort of take any attribution away from me and stuff. And we chatted and went back and forth a little bit. And I was like, look, I don't have any ego around rich Click. I think it's great if you do it. And in fact, it will make my life easier if you make Typer do it itself, because then fewer people will be coming to me and asking for help about Typer. So he went ahead and actually in 2 days or something, it entirely replicated this. And so a big chunk of people using rich Click for Typer now kind of went away. And if you're using Typer, which you should because it's great, you have very similar functionality natively now. So that was really cool. I was very happy about that. It's a good success of any open source project as it gets kind of absorbed into other bigger projects, is kind of how I view it. But there was still a lot of pull requests coming in, and I had one come in, and this is verbatim from GitHub. I was like, this is great, but I'm just starting to kind of merge pull request blinds because I just don't really have time to spend a lot of time with this. And I did a little plea, and I said, look, if there's anyone out there who'd like to help me out on this, then that would be great. I didn't have any expectation at all from this, but to my surprise, this guy, Daniel Reeves, did reply to me, and he reached out and he said, look, I use this tool for my work. I find it really helpful. I love open source. I'd be happy to help you out on the maintenance. So I very gladly accepted his offer, and for the past year or so, Daniel's been really taking the lion's share of the maintenance off me. And he has pushed in loads of really cool updates to rich Click. Stuff like tests, which I probably should have had there from the start. All these kind of best practices, which maybe you don't bother with if you're just doing a little pet project one evening for yourself and you never really expect anyone else to use it. He's really kind of bulked out the library to be something a bit more performant and kind of better suited to the number of downloads that it's getting. He made it run faster, load quicker, things like this. And he's also been really into sort of building out and having a bit more of a personality. Took the README and he spun it into a MakeDocs documentation website. All the styling I'm using was like the blocky text. That was all like his idea. He came up with the logo and stuff like this. So he's really got into it, and sort of together the two of us maintain this package, and it's something that I can now handle. A big job shared is much more manageable, and it's really fun. It's like someone new to work with, and it starts to kind of build a little bit of community itself. I want to draw attention to one thing he built, because I know he put quite a lot of work into it, and I think it's really cool. This is on the new website, the MakeDocs website. He got excited and went away and did a little bit of JavaScript here. Because this is just an observation that almost everyone using rich Click just uses the defaults and doesn't configure it, which is fine. But this is kind of a little live editor just to show that you really can configure everything, and you can just click around and kind of play and come up with some sort of styles that you like, with the colors at least. And then just underneath this, it gives you the text, little code block that you can copy into your project. So go and have a click around. It's kind of fun. It doesn't do all of the configuration options, but it gives you a taste at least. OK, coming up pretty close to the end of my talk. Now I want to just do one little side note, which is about another project I made around a similar time, which had also a similar kind of name, rich-codex. And this comes back to that functionality I showed earlier about how you can generate SVG screenshots of help text from rich. And rich, I should be clear here, the rich library does all the heavy lifting here. Rich is generating those screenshots, and you can generate any terminal screenshots like that with any output very easily from rich. But I was writing a lot of documentation at the time, and I started generating screenshots of the help text from tools, but I wanted to have a bit of a more flexible tool to generate like screenshots of basically any output. So what rich-codex does is it's a little command line tool, and you can give it a bunch of different things, but one of the easiest ways to use it is you give it some markdown. So you've written your README file or your documentation. And anyone who's not familiar with Markdown syntax, this is how you embed an image. So you have a path to an image, and then you have some like text attribute, a title attribute on it. So what rich-click does is it looks for where you've done this, where there's a path which may not yet exist, and then you use backticks in here to indicate a command. And if it finds any of these, it will run that command, save a SVG screenshot of the output, put that screenshot in the file path that you expected, be it SVG or PNG, and then when you look at your Markdown file, you have a nice picture of a cat, or whatever. So if you're writing documentation for command line tool, this is fantastic, because you can do all your little code snippets, you can do all your little command line output examples. You do it once, you just write the commands, and then you have there's a GitHub action that you can use straight out of the box. Or you can do some automation of your own kind, and every time you push a new release, all those version numbers and everything all updates automatically. So a little bit of fun, little side project. It's not as mature as rich-click, so you'll probably find it frustrating and it breaks a lot, but hey, any maintainers in the room? Okay. So my take-homes from this was true for generally working in open source for the past decade or so, but I really advocate for spending that extra 5% of effort to generalize your solutions. If you've done something more than once, then maybe you can wrap it in an interface. Give it those click decorators. Just do that extra little polish just so that you yourself can reuse it, and it can be sort of generalized as much as possible. You very, very rarely regret taking that extra step. Once you've done that, publish it. It's super easy to throw stuff onto PyPI. You've got anything written in Python, doesn't matter if it's big or small, doesn't matter if it's not polished or if it's buggy or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Even if you're the only person who's ever going to use it, you can still publish it. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't take anything away. It's very little effort. And if you're lucky, then someone else might find it useful, and you never know, you might end up in a position like this where you hit a niche unexpectedly and your tool takes off, which is actually true for all the software I work on in my day job as well. Similar story, I made it for myself, I published it, it turned out other people found it useful, and now it's my whole career. And finally, ask for help. I don't think that I would have found another maintainer for rich-click had I not explicitly said, hey, I need help here. People are wary of stepping on your toes, of taking away ownership of projects. People don't know your personal circumstances. I hadn't said anywhere that I was about to go on paternity leave. So don't be afraid of just like putting out a plea and just being like, put an issue up, put something out on Twitter, whatever, just saying like, I'm looking for maintainers on this project. You might not get any response, but you never know. You might get some help. Okay, here's a reminder. This is how to get rich-click, pip install rich-click. And then I should have put the other line, import rich-click as click, and you're done. It's all open source. It's on GitHub, and there's a docs site you can find there. And it's all on PyPI and Conda Forge. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Will, and who really did the heavy lifting here by writing the rich library and also kickstarted me on the project and gave me lots of help and advice. And I'd like to say a big thank you for Sebastian for working with Typer, and especially to Daniel Reeves, who did much of the work that I presented today and has been really fundamental to the success of this project. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Hi, nice package. As a colourblind person that frequently has issues reading colourised text in the terminal, does rich-click provide any way for, not for package maintainers, but for the end users of those packages to customise any problem colours for them? For those 10 to 12% of us that frequently have problems.
That's a really interesting question and idea. Something I think Daniel's been talking about is the concept of introducing themes in the future. So rather than saying, I want this border or this particular bit of text to be this color, you can have kind of packages of themes to make it a bit easier. Something that would be really cool would be if rich-click could look for a colorblind environment variable or something like that, and then switch themes, because then that would work on any package using rich-click. You could set it once in your bash.rc file, and then all of your command line help text would be colorblind friendly. Put in a GitHub issue.
That'd be lovely.
So I have this, I'm using this open source project, a Python project, and it's not super easy to read the code, and it's missing some features. But the maintainer doesn't seem to want to accept pull requests. Mm-hmm. Do you have any suggestions for how to continue with this?
Yeah, this is the downside is if the maintainer's unwilling to accept help or just not reading the issues and doesn't realize what's going on. Or often I think people feel guilty that they don't have time to really respond and then sort of start ignoring it semi-intentionally. There's no easy answers for that. I mean, other than being explicit and being like, hey, look, I have time. I use this project. It's important to me. I'm happy to help you. You can sort of try and spell it out. But if there's still no response and still no, then of course the beauty of open source is you can fork it. If a project is effectively dead, then there's nothing to stop you from having your own fork, publishing your own fork, and then continuing maintenance there. That's the absolute last resort, should be, but it is an option.
Maybe a follow-up to that. It's not dead at all.
Ah.
He does develop it, and he does help out with issues and stuff. He just
not yours.
He just doesn't accept pull requests, I guess, and it's a difficult to use or read project.
Yeah, that's tougher then because you don't want to end up in like a competition. And I've seen certainly in quite a lot of open source projects where I've put in pull requests and the maintainer's been like, oh, I like the idea. I've rewritten this myself and pushed it over here and I'm closing your PR. Personally, I'm fine with that. And that's a good solution. But if your ideas are just being flatly rejected, then not much you can do. Sorry.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
What was the hardest part about the integration of Rich and Click? And is there anything you would do differently if you would have started again today?
Ooh, the hardest bit was reading through hundreds and hundreds of lines of Click source code, trying to understand what the hell is going on, and trying to basically kind of reverse engineer the nitty gritty of it. The way this works basically is kind of monkey patching Rich, so that's how we do it. So Rich Click itself imports Click and then exposes all the same APIs so that you can continue to use it without modification. And that means that Rich Click has to really know all the internals of Click and understand what to expose and how those functions work and how to pass context class objects around and all this kind of stuff. So that was the most difficult bit, I think, but it was really interesting. I think most of the people in the audience will sympathize with that kind of enjoying digging into something and figuring it out and understanding how it works. But that was definitely the most challenging. Would I do anything differently? I don't think so. Not really. There's been a bunch of improvements that Daniel's made with like improving config and sort of making stuff a bit cleaner and a bit more structured, but I'm not sure I would have really been in a place to see that coming. So yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with it, really. Any more questions? Otherwise, I'll be around for the rest of the day, so you can come and grab me in a coffee break.